Welcome to Serious Talk, the Military Minute. I'm your host, Greg Banks. We're all about helping veterans, active service members, and military spouses find their place in the Salesforce ecosystem through real success stories and practical resources. Grab your coffee and let's talk about how your military experience can be your secret weapon in the tech world. Hannah Piersall, welcome to Serious Talks, a Military Minute. We're proud to have you as our inaugural guest on this show. We will get into the significance of you being the first guest a little bit later. This show is about content that will encourage, inspire, and guide veterans and military spouses on their journey into the Salesforce space. This is your story. Let's get into it. So welcome, Hannah. Glad to have you today. I want to hear a little bit about your background prior to this actual journey beginning. Tell us a little bit about your life leading up to marriage, finding yourself around the military, what you were thinking about school-wise, career-wise. Just tell us a little bit about you before we get into that part of the story, okay?
Yeah. I grew up around the military. My dad spent a lot of time in the Army and Air Force Reserves. So, and grandfather, uncle, brother-in-law, kind of just, that was a part of life, was being surrounded by that service. So while I didn't, seek that out in a partner, I'm not surprised that it ended up happening that way. I kind of pursued more artistic passion in college. I thought I would get a music degree and then switched over to literature. And then my career before Salesforce was in event planning. So a job in Salesforce was not in the cards for me. I never expected I would have a position in tech. So I'm pleasantly surprised that it worked out that way, but that didn't seem like a possibility or something I was pursuing.
And it's without asking age and things of that nature, your dad and definitely your grandfather is of what we call that greatest generation. This generation, while doing great things, did not come home and talk a lot about their journey and what it looked like coming out. That was just a different time. So as you find yourself married and in that space, and you're about to embark on, all right, I've got to find my own way in my career. My husband's actively serving, and we talk a little bit about that. You didn't have a whole lot to go on, I'm imagining. You were out kind of finding your way through the ecosystem of tools and programs to help you out. So why don't you go ahead and step into that? Let's talk about, why were you looking? Were you working? If so, what were you doing? What brought this chapter on?
Yeah. Before Salesforce, I was working at a nonprofit called the Navy SEAL Foundation, which is a nonprofit that serves the Naval Special Warfare community. So, like I said, I was a program and event coordinator and got to serve a really deserving community in a rewarding way. That was a really fun job. I started that job in San Diego when we were stationed there, and lucky for me, their headquarters were in Virginia Beach, and that was our next duty station. So I was able to keep that job with me when we moved, but I knew that opportunity wouldn't present itself again. My husband and I didn't know what the next chapter would look like, if that would be another duty station or separating from the military, but we knew it wouldn't be in either of those two places. So the need my desire to have a career that I could take with me became stronger at that point, because I knew that would come to an end. So my husband's, the person that he was taking over for at work, was a transitioning service member. They were getting out of the Navy and was going through the Hiring Our Heroes Salesforce Fellowship program and shared that with me. So that was my first introduction to a Salesforce career, and sounded far too good to be true that it took me a minute to get bought into it. But she was the one who introduced me, and once I learned of the opportunity, kind of took it and ran with it.
Great. Yeah, the military community, I think it's despite the fact that I'm not a veteran, one of my great passions about it is that brotherhood, sisterhood, the community that comes from it, not just in the enlisted, but in the spouses. Mm-hmm. Plenty of TV shows and movies made about those communities. It's real. Like, in absence of your family, who you're almost always separated from, you kind of have this family that's with you on base, wherever that is. So understanding how you connect with those, what you learn from them, and as many tools as there are, every tool is not for everybody. So finding the right one that aligns your passion, your interest, your experience is really important. So tell me a little bit about, what other programs might you have learned about? What made you choose the one you chose? What made it unique and different? And when the first time you heard the word Salesforce, what images conjured up in your mind? Why did you choose that? And looking back on it, was there anything that kind of said, yeah, this is the right thing for me? When did that click for you?
Yeah, great question. There weren't, many other programs that I was pursuing or even looking at. This opportunity kind of fell in my lap at the perfect time. There was an application deadline, and you needed the Salesforce Administrator certification before you could even apply. And at the point that I heard about this fellowship cohort, I had, I think, about a month to get the certification, do all the things to make myself look better on LinkedIn, like a Salesforce professional who knows what they're talking about. And so I almost didn't have time to think about anything else. So I just kind of thought, let me try this. This a friend and trusted person has told me that this is a great opportunity and one I should seize. So I just dove in head first and didn't look up until I was accepted into the program. And then I think at that point is where I kind of thought, wait, what am I doing? This is so different from anything that I've ever done. And I don't know what I've gotten myself into, but I'm here. I'm going to try. So I think it kind of clicked throughout my time in the cohort. It was nerve wracking being in that group of people. You know, everyone's trying to do the same thing. And so it was scary to be here and have this chance and, you know, be worried that I would not make the most of it or just wasn't the right fit. But I was kind of equally as unburdened going through the process because I thought there's just no way that this will work out. It's too good to be true. This career potential, wow, being selected in this group of really talented, amazing people, there's no way. So let me try it. And what's the worst that can happen?
That's a really interesting perspective. I think in non-military life, you go into an interview and there's almost a natural cutthroat kind of thing. Why do I want to make myself look better than the other people coming to this? How do I increase my chances?
Yeah.
But on top of everything else, you kind of have the added burden. These are all military spouses. They all deserve this opportunity. Why am I better? Like that, if you have any self-doubts,
Yeah.
that's probably being perpetuated by the process. So
Yeah.
as you applied for that, what did it look like to apply? What did it look, how long between application and approval? How quickly did that move into interviews and things like that? Tell me a little bit about the program, your introduction to it, and what, the first week or two of going into that look like.
Yeah. For anyone who's not familiar, Hiring Our Heroes is a U.S. Chamber of Commerce foundation, and their goal is to connect the military community with American jobs. So they have tons of different fellowship programs, internships, and one that they offer is a Salesforce fellowship. So I luckily didn't have to feel too nervous or wait too long to hear that I got in because I had applied so soon up against the application deadline. But once I got in, you kind of get going right away, and you're there with military spouses, veterans, and transitioning service members. So that added a different level of competitiveness. And, you want the best for everyone. We're all part of the same community. Right. So it wasn't, elbowing people out of the way, but veterans and transitioning service members had much different experience than I did. Their resumes Right. were so much more impressive because they've done so much more work in the military and they have so much more life experience to speak on is kind of what my perspective was. So I think that added a different level of nerves and just going into the process. But the idea is that there's companies who participate in the fellowship and their goal is to hire, kind of train up Salesforce professionals with a 3-month internship and ultimately hire you as a full-time employee at the end of the fellowship. So the interview process is kind of like a dating service. You are trying to match with a company that likes you as much as you like them. And so I interviewed with several companies. It's really similar to the real world. You can reach out to the companies who are participating. You can wait for them to reach out to you. People did it all different kinds of ways, but luckily Serious Solutions was one of the companies that I interviewed with and ended up completing my fellowship with.
Great. Yeah, I was trying to think. It's been a little while now since you interviewed at Sirius. I don't know how much you remember about the interview, but I think in my experience with Hiring Our Heroes, one thing I really liked is in a normal job interview, like you go in, you sit down with HR or maybe somebody in a department, and you have no way to learn anything about anything until you show up. We can Google things, but like you can't have one-on-one conversations with people
Mhm.
usually. But with Hiring Our Heroes, that's different. Like you may connect to 10 different Serious employees before your first interview. You can talk through them after the interview before you've been accepted or rejected. I don't know what you remember from that interview process, but talk to me about what you recall of the interview. How did you feel going through it? What did you feel like? Typically when you end an interview, then you think of something you really should have said.
Yeah.
And then maybe from the time, obviously we reached out and hired you, what did that feel like? Did you feel validated? Did that close any of those self-doubts and things you might have had? Talk to me a little bit about through what that process felt like.
Yeah, I do remember the interview. It stood out to me because it was very relaxed and transparent from start to finish. And any follow-up questions I had for Sirius, they were answered with full transparency, which I'm not surprised by. That's one of Sirius' core values. But it was different from other companies that I would interview with. You could just tell when someone was asking the question that they wrote down on the paper, moving on to the next, not really interested in getting to know you as an individual. And Sirius really did that. It felt like a conversation. I could tell, and I think it was vocalized during the interview, that we're looking for the right fit. We're looking for the right team member. Any skills that you need in Salesforce. We know you're new to this. You don't have work experience in Salesforce. We're going to get that to you during the fellowship. That's the whole reason why we're here. We want to look for a good personality fit, everything like that. So that was really evident to me in the interview, and it felt just like a great fit. And they were one of the only companies kind of following up the interview, asking questions over email to answer them fully. Even what's the salary that I can expect? And a lot of companies would kind of shirk away from that question or not answer it completely. Sirius came right out and said, here's what you're going to start at. And that just did a lot to increase my trust in Sirius and who they were as people, not just a company. So that was great. And so many of the employees also went through the Hiring Our Heroes program. So they were willing to meet with me, talk with me over LinkedIn, and kind of just make me feel that much more comfortable going into the fellowship. So that was a great process. I think as good as it could have been to ease my nerves coming into this foreign concept of a job. And I do remember starting and feeling extremely nervous and wondering when my teammates or you, Greg, were going to wake up and say, hold on, what is she doing here? She doesn't know what we want her to know. And it took me a long time to get past that fear that one day you guys were going to wake up and kick me out of here. You always knew where I was at. I just needed to accept that you knew that. You were training me up, knowing full well that I didn't have experience, but you knew I could get there.
Yeah, it's interesting to think. I'm obviously a little further on my journey of life than you being a little bit older, but I think back in my exposure to IT over my career. And when I moved into the workforce many years ago, when I think of IT with no connotations of the words, I mean, I just kind of saw the nerds, right? These were just really, really smart computer people that largely were behind locked doors because that's where the servers and things were. And they would come out when they needed you or you needed them. But they just kind of did those things. They really weren't people who interacted with people a lot. They dealt with machines all day. And I give a lot of credit to Salesforce here. There's a word gamification we hear in the Salesforce space a good bit, that it kind of turns things into a competition or things that it's not intentional morale building, I don't think, but it's disarming. Right. It really is a great program. And I think Trailhead was probably one of the things that did not exist when I came into the ecosystem. But it was one of the things that was empowering, right? It was a way for anybody to go in there for free on your own time. Like you just say you went from knowing nothing to being an admin cert inside of 30 days. I was in the ecosystem 11 years before I got my first certification, talking about self-doubts. But what I have found that's great, and I think in consulting it's even more unique, is typically people that are in the Salesforce space are people, right? Who happen to have acquired some technical skills as opposed to really technical people that tolerate people. So, I don't know what that felt like for you. I think if you were event planning, you probably had a social element to your personality and your experience that probably, at least on that side, felt really comfortable to you. But now you're sticking me in front of people. I don't necessarily have the technical confidence yet. What did that first client call feel like? Do you remember the first time you were called out in a call and said, "Hey, Hannah, why don't you run today's call?" What fear came up? How did you overcome that? And I would say when you ended that call, what was the first emotion you felt?
I do remember the first call, and I was lucky enough that it was in my fellowship, not, as a full-time employee, so I could kind of warm up to that a little bit. Just pure terror that I would sound like a buffoon and have, I want the client to trust me, and they knew I was a fellow or an intern and everything, but still, I wanted to put on a good face, and so I felt so nervous. You guys did a great job of setting me up to succeed, but those nerves were just a full body experience, and it went fine. It went great. I remember that first client, and they were so gracious and understanding. And I just remember when the call ended, such relief. I think I got up and, at least stood up from my desk and moved around and was like, oh, I got to take a break from that. I'm so glad that that's over. But yeah, I do hear what you're saying about the people versus technical, or you feel like you're in two different buckets. And that's how I saw career options for me when I was younger. I saw myself as a people person, as a more creative person, not a technical behind a computer person, because I didn't know how it worked. And I just thought that that's it. Not that I couldn't learn, but you have your passions and your path, and you can find any job in that bucket, but stay there. So I think that was kind of a hard hurdle to get over. And part of the ecosystem is there's so many different roles that you can do. You can be an admin, you can be a program manager, or you can be really heavy on the technical side as an architect or just a technical consultant. And so even starting the fellowship, my mindset was I'm going to stay a people person. I don't even want to think about the heavy technical side. And I hope people don't ask me too many questions because I'm just going to be a people person,
Yeah,
even in
the old
this
adage,
tech
fake it till
space.
you make it.
Yeah,
Comes up, right?
big
Yeah, I mean,
time.
I'm thinking back when I first got married, and the word career is thrown around. They have career guidance counselors in high schools now, and I don't know how many people come out of high school or even college for that matter and say, "I'm going to start my career."
Yeah.
Right? You're going to get a job, and you just hope that works out.
Yeah.
But I got to think. I mean, I'll say now why you're my first guest is you were my first fellow. You came on as a fellow just a couple of months after I came on as an employee. I was brand new to hiring our heroes, and part of the reason I came here was my passion to do some things for the military, for veterans and active duty and whatnot. I was totally remiss about the situation with military spouses, the situation that you're in, that you're typically on a base. Bases are generally not in the city. Job opportunities, much less career opportunities, are probably limited in a lot of those towns. And if you find one and if you like it, you still probably just call it a job because you can't put down roots here, right? It's just a matter of time before you find yourself somewhere else. So as you find your way into this, as you apply to this fellowship, as you get accepted, you start. When in your mind did it click like, this is not a job? This is actually a career I can see myself doing for many, many years to come. Do you remember that moment?
I think there were several. There's one big one that stands out throughout my time as a consultant. When I was tasked with things that felt like something I could never do, heavy automation work or something far too technical. When I was able to do those, even if I needed help or had to raise a hand and have someone step in to walk me through a couple steps, completing those things that felt like there's no way I'll ever be able to do that helped me build so much confidence and made it feel like, okay, maybe I can keep hanging out here. This is something. But part of that was being asked to run deployments for several of our clients. There was a need on our team and I was asked to fill it. So working through those deployments and nothing catching on fire when I did it, I was ultimately asked to be the subject matter expert for release management and deployment. And I think that was probably the moment where I kind of realized, okay, I'm meant to be here. This is something big and I can do a lot with this. I feel excited about this, passionate about this topic in particular. So where can I go? Like, how can I keep building onto this and learning more and continuing to grow? And that was, fairly far into my journey. So embarrassing to admit that it took me that long to finally realize that this is something real. But I think that's just, I had to build up that confidence over time. And I think that's still a work in progress, but I'm getting there.
I think I think back when I kind of fell into this, there's a phrase you hear quite a bit in the ecosystem called accidental admins that not many people I would say in high school know about Salesforce. A lot of people who you find as admins and product owners and things like that in the Salesforce space were off doing something else, and they got volunteered or voluntold, as one might say, to all right, you're going to be in charge of this. And I think in big picture, just looking back, I've been around this for almost 15 years. It's just so big. You feel the pressure, maybe like you have to know it all. And that's not really even possible. So what you need to know is enough to do your job and where to go find the answers when you don't know them. So I think you found that obviously in the tools that you have access to. But I think back to when you went from being a fellow to a full-time employee, when we voluntold you to be over the deployment, just looking for the right opportunities to give you the next tool to put in your bag of things and experience. And it's not a giant rush. It's not like you had 30 days to get an admin cert, which means you're expert of all things admin. I don't even know if anybody's an expert of all things admin. It's a constantly changing product. When you look back, let's get past maybe the first year, right? Think about the projects you were working on at that point. What surprised you? You mentioned you were really nervous early on that we were going to find out you really didn't know. Obviously you did. Obviously you figured that out. But what was probably your biggest surprise? Let's say the first couple of years, you're actually in here, you're doing consulting. You've led some client calls. You've overseen some deployments. Do you recall anything that just really surprising you?
Yeah.
That you were good at it, or like Yeah, subject matter expert for a 1 year person in the space are not two phrases you typically would put together. But
Yeah.
what stands out to you?
I was very surprised at how much I liked automation and flow building once I understood that better and, running deployments and kind of the dev aspect of putting together a metadata package. Like I said, I was so set on being a people person and staying a people person and not being pushed out of that lane into something I was not comfortable with. And I remember during our review process, we always ask, what's your career trajectory? Where do you want to, what's the next role for you here at Sirius? And I always thought, I want to stay in the people. I'll be a program manager. I feel good about that. Still had so much to learn to be able to, manage an entire team, but that felt like a safe lane for me. And I remember during one review period, I started to prep for that question and really think about, what do I want to do? People are always asking, what's next? What's next? And I thought, I feel more drawn to the technical route because I've been given more opportunity to do technical tasks and I'm able to do them. I'm so surprised that I could get through these and do them well. And that gave me so much confidence and kind of lit a fire under me and just made me want to keep learning more. So I was really surprised by that. I did not think that kind of more of a technical route was one that I would be pursuing more so than the people route. And I think just being trusted enough to try technical tasks that were unfamiliar to me and knowing that I had a team around to support me and help when I needed it allowed me to sit and try and fail, but gain the confidence that you did it. Nothing crazy happened. So try again, try another new thing. And that it just kind of, it's a positive cycle that keeps on going because it just keeps building your confidence as you complete more things that you've never done before. And that's all over the place in Salesforce. Like you said, there's no admins who know everything. There's no architect who knows everything because it's constantly changing. And I think there's a beauty to that.
Yeah, I mean, I probably should give some background here to validate that statement. I always made it a point when we were doing a mentorship or a fellowship that I would give you an actual employee review at the end of that because I wanted you to know, as you mentioned at the beginning, when you decided to choose Sirius as the partner that you came and did your fellowship with, that gave you 12 weeks to interview Sirius as much as Sirius was interviewing you, right? It's a trial basis. But I always felt like to wrap that thing up in a bow at the end of the fellowship, I actually would walk you through a mock review. I would just take the time to sit down and review you as if you were an employee. There were things that didn't apply, but we would go through as much of that as we could. And at that time, we were doing these once a quarter. So from your fellowship, it was about the 2 year mark when you made that switch. We're talking 9 reviews that I had asked you, where do you want to go? And you continued from the fellowship up to that point. You had kept saying engagement manager, which is our project manager, if you will. And I remember that day you answered and go, no, I think I want to go the technical route. And I said, what?
Yeah.
Let's talk about this for a minute. And, it's an interesting thing in my career in the role that I'm in. I'm not the architect. I'm not the senior consultant. I'm not the one doing the most technical things on the team. So what I did feel like my role was, particularly in the fellowship and mentorship side of things, was to help you look down the road. I think when you're young in the Salesforce career, and particularly when you're just younger in life, there's way more in front of you than behind you. There's way more unknowns than knowns. And it's very difficult to make those decisions. And you and I have talked about this. This was not just a job to you, right? Mm-hmm. You're trying to set yourself up with a career so that as your husband continues his service and one day gets out, you're actually carrying that load for the family or helping to empower him to make his post-military career decisions as well. Right. So you were starting at this point, I'm guessing, to feel some of that weight. A lot of big things happened over that next year, but you used a word with me, and I hear this in this space a good bit, imposter syndrome. And I don't know if that's a thing that we hear on Hiring Our Heroes. That's just once people been in these meetings, that it's just vocabulary that comes up. But talk a little bit about that. I hear it a lot. I got to say, I have felt it in my career, particularly when I got into doing Salesforce. But talk a little bit about what that is. Was that something you felt? And again, I think we talked a little bit about the moment when you didn't feel like you were faking it, so to speak. You knew enough to at least stand your ground on the things you knew. But talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I definitely felt imposter syndrome, especially in the fellowship. But even after starting full time, we had Salesforce professionals come and speak during the fellowship. We would have Friday huddles where we'd hear from people who had done a similar process as us, maybe not gone through Hiring Our Heroes, but had started in the Salesforce ecosystem and kind of look at where I am now. Here's how I can help you. And often we would talk about imposter syndrome. And however many times it was brought up, I always found a way to think, yeah, but you're different. you have more career experience than me. You have more life experience than me. You're not as anxious of a person because you're able to speak to this large group of people. I found a way to say in my head for everyone who said I had imposter syndrome that, yeah, but you're different. You got over it because you're in a different place than me. That's not true. I'm sure that they felt that way as well. But it took me a long time to get past that and realize that people are asking me questions. I know how to answer them. Wow, that's cool. I know what I'm doing a little bit. Not every question, but I really do think it was the subject matter expert point where I kind of woke up and realized, okay, I'm trusted to do this. I know how to do this well. I'm meant to be here. That was far into the journey. So that was just a confidence issue for me. And I heard that during my fellowship and afterwards, like, you're doing great. Where's this lack of confidence coming from? And I think that was just a mental hurdle that I had to get past to accept that I'm here and I belong here, even if I didn't see myself being here.
Yeah, I say this to people all the time. I remember saying it in a lot of the mentor interview or fellowship interviews back in the day. It really comes down to the power of choice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I get up today and I choose to take the things I know and do them well, and I choose to do one more badge and trailhead, just sheer momentum and initiative, I can step up, go do that trail, learn that thing. It doesn't make you an expert. It gives you experience. It gives you some knowledge. You now have a tool in your bag that you can pull out when needed and use it. And that, to me, again, I think this is something. I think Trailhead didn't come out till I had been in the ecosystem about 6 or 7 years. You had to pay to go take a class when I started it. The opportunity for that is rare. It's why I didn't get an admin cert for 11 years. But that being said, as you chose to do that, I mean, what that means, and again, I think this is a powerful part of it, is like you have your job, you're doing your fellowship, or you're now a full-time employee. I can sign on the Trailhead at night. I can sign on the weekend. This doesn't make it a 24-hour day job, but it empowers you when you make time and you choose to take that initiative. You can go better yourself. And it really is that simple. And once you're in it, then you look around and realize, oh Lord, there's 50 different paths I can go down. I can be marketing cloud or sales cloud or service cloud or CPQ. There's so many different options there. And again, most people don't try to master 12 trails. Most people choose their lane. You become aware of other things because you just don't have the nature in consulting to pick what clients only do the things that you know. But what that means is you just get a little bit more and a little bit more, right? Just like any other job.
Yeah.
If you went to work in an office as a secretary, or you went to be a lead engineer or a professor, whatever those careers are, nobody walks in the first day overly confident and qualified. Or if they do, maybe they shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's fantastic, Hannah. It's been a great reward. I feel like we grew up together, so to speak, here at Sirius, both in my understanding of the Hiring Your Heroes program, the challenges that a military spouse faces, the decisions you have to make as a spouse. What happens if you get relocated in the middle of it? Like you started out by saying, this is a job I could take with me if and when we move, which did eventually happen. And you're afforded the time to go do that. So it's been great to watch you come out of that shell and step up. Just this week, you were kind of called out as a subject matter expert on a couple of things, not just release management, but also on ClickUp, one of the tools we use here. Just congratulations. It's been great to see you succeed so fast coming through this.
Thank you.
Just trying to wrap this up today. Think back to Hannah of 2020, 2021 maybe. If you could talk to her and give her some advice, all the things you know now, both about Salesforce, about hiring our heroes, about imposter syndrome, of all those things, what's one piece of advice you would give her so that she wouldn't go into this process with these doubts?
I would tell her that her soft skills will translate to technical skills. Even if you don't have them now, the skills that you have or that we have as military spouses, being adaptable, communication, organization, all the things that we have to manage in our daily lives as military spouses have set you up so well to succeed. And even if you don't have the experience for the job that you're pursuing, for the Salesforce career path that you want to go, the soft skills that you possess will help you get there. And I think that was my biggest hurdle to get over is I don't have it. How can I start? But because I possessed qualities that allowed my teammates to trust me to task me with technical things and trust that I would get it done or raise my hand if I had a question, not let it fall through the cracks. That's what helped me achieve those technical tasks and get more confident and helped get me where I am today. Just because you don't know how to do it now should not stop you from trying, because you have so many other skills that will help you get there.
Yeah, I look at the military community in law enforcement. My best friend was unfortunately a police officer killed in the line of duty, and I watched the police department he worked at come around his family. I mean, we got together every year on the anniversary of his death for 10 years, and they were still showing up. I think the integrity and the character that just comes with being in that community says something. And to your point, yeah, you have these soft skills, but you also have character.
Mm-hmm.
And in this world, that's not super common. So you highlighted throughout today things like, if something's given to me, I'm going to do it to my best of my ability. If I can't do it, I've got the character to speak up before it becomes a problem. So whether it's imposter syndrome or just self-doubt, or I'm young and I just don't have that experience yet, it doesn't diminish the value you bring to a team.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly a Salesforce team. So I'm so glad to see that you've chosen Salesforce and that you do choose the technical path. I think you have those skills, and I was glad to see you grow into that decision. Really appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to close out today beyond advice, just something to throw back out into the sphere of military spouses to encourage them?
Great question. I would encourage anyone who's, interested in a career path. You have so much more to offer than you think you might based on your circumstances or lack of experience because of your circumstance. And I hope that you'll try and get your name out there. If it's Salesforce that you are interested in pursuing, buy into it, because there are so many opportunities that can be afforded to you if you buy into it and try your best. I'm rooting for you. I do agree that the military community and the Salesforce ecosystem is so encouraging and helpful. So just knowing that there's resources and people out there who have gone through or are currently in a similar situation to you, to reach out and take advantage of that and learn from other people. I think that helped me a lot in the beginning of my career as well.
Very well said. Look at that experience coming out. Great job, Hannah. Again, it's a remarkable thing to watch you, to be your manager for a while, to definitely be your coach as a mentor. But no prouder moment than to see where you're standing today and leading the company on releases, some of the most important things we do. So thank you for your time today. I appreciate you sharing and giving back. I really hope that this brings the encouragement to the military spouse community that we're trying to bring. If you guys have any follow-up questions for Hannah, she can be found on LinkedIn. I know there's always a passion to connect with other military spouses about Salesforce, about hiring our heroes. Again, just a great wealth of knowledge and experience to go with that. So thanks for your time today, Hannah.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
That concludes today's episode of Serious Talk, the Military Minute. On behalf of Serious Solutions, we would like to extend our sincere appreciation to the entire veteran and military spouse community for your unwavering commitment and sacrifice. Remember, your military experience has equipped you with exceptional skills that the Salesforce ecosystem needs. Join us next time as we continue to explore pathways to success in the Salesforce space. If you know a veteran on the verge of separating from the military, or a military spouse considering Salesforce as a career, please share this episode with them. If you enjoyed the material, please give us a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe on YouTube so that you can be alerted to new content. We greatly appreciate all of your support. Please see the show notes for links to learn more about Serious Solutions and other programs discussed in this episode. I want to extend a special thanks to Jason Fowler for allowing use of his song, Mystery Room. Until next time, this is Greg Banks, signing off.